you all with us. Before starting this event with Stephanie Charles, Mauricio Salles, and Guilherme Carvalho, I will briefly talk about some administrative details and format of the event, and also our goals. First of all, to watch this event in English, there's a YouTube Global Hubs channel. It's gonna be broadcasted in English with simultaneous translation. To watch it in Portuguese, we have the main Grupo Uniters YouTube channel. And also at the bottom, you have the reference and the links to the other version. So if you wanna change from one language to the other, you can do that. So please, throughout the event, you can send your questions through chat. We have a team following up everything that's going on. So please just ask the question once and we will know that you have asked the question. So we're gonna do our best to answer all questions, but if you repeat the question, it's not gonna help us and it's not gonna help you either. So the event's gonna be like that. I'm gonna speak like for that than 5 minutes in the beginning right now. Then you're gonna have 10 minutes of conversation with each speaker. I'm gonna ask them questions and ask for very brief questions of around 2 minutes. And then we're gonna have around 25 minutes for questions and answer from the audience. That is to be very informal and try to meet the interest of all of you. And we're gonna end at 8 p.m. Brazil time. What's the goals of this Talking Business event? This one specifically, one, to show the impact of a short international experience and how it can influence the career of someone, and then emphasize the importance of unexpected opportunities. And these opportunities, they tend to arise for those who are willing to do things and who embrace all unexpected situations, and to give some practical tips on how to create and sustain international relationships. That is to show that it can be done remotely. Of course, that's very important, especially in the previous couple of years that nobody could travel. And finally, I'd like to encourage all of you to overcome your fears and make mistakes. Of course, I'm sure that I made so many mistakes speaking Portuguese, and that's part of the business. You need to make mistakes in order to carry on. So Talking Business Project is a series of international events. We do it on a monthly basis, and it's an opportunity to broaden the debate about global trends in management, communication, business, and technology by listening and interacting with international and Brazilian speakers, people who know Brazil and other countries. We're going to have 2 more events in 2021. One is going to happen in November 18th, and we have the link here. You can register right now. We're going to have Professor Susanna Loeb. She's the director of Annenberg Institute at the Brown University, a very well-known university in the US, an international university. Then we're going to have Guilherme Vicente, the co-founder and president of the Brazilian Mova company, and he's an economy professor at the Zurich University. We are also going to have Professor Jefferson Sparrow from Uniter. That's going to happen at 15 p.m. Brazil, and at the end, you're going to have 3 brilliant women who foster startups in Brazil. They are investors of 2 different companies. So the main goal of Global Hub is to bring more about Uninter to the world and more about the world to Uninter. So this interaction, opening our horizons is our focus. Now let's go to some informal bios. So I'd like you to chat their written bio. I'm going to be very informal on how I treat them because they are my friends. And I think this proximity is very important for you to be able to have a very good international relations. Even if you're scared, don't stay behind, don't be too formal, it's not going to help you. So I'm going to leave outside many of their achievements. I apologize for that. But, well, first of all, Mauricio Salas, and then Guilherme Carvalho, and finally, I'm gonna change into English to introduce Stephanie and have my first conversation with her. So each speaker is gonna talk about their impact of having shortened international experiences and about from different point of views. Don't be afraid of asking questions about profession, career. From my experience, asking questions doesn't cost anything. The worst case that can happen is the speaker say that they're not going to answer. So Salas is a co-founder of ELGRADE Research Laboratory, focused on next generation electrical grids. And he's a professor of the University of São Paulo Polytechnic School. He's was a professor at the Harvard University for a year, and he's a master in eolic generation, wind generation and power systems from the State University of Unicamp. He's a great barbecue maker. I'm joking, but from my point of view, that was very important. We were coming back from a technical visit. I think it was a wind company with a group of students, half from Brazil, half from Harvard University. And he said, okay, let's do an interaction. And he said, okay, I'm gonna be the barbecue man. And I think that this interaction with students, especially among some of the students there, is still bringing some good things. And that happened 10 years ago. So Guilherme Carvalho is a professor and coordinator of the journalist course at UNINTER, where he's also a member of the research ethics community. Guilherme is also a professor at the Ponta Grossa State University. Going back to our personal interaction, I started working at UNINTER for around a year. Because of the pandemic, I've been working only remotely, and I have never had a chance to meet him. So, but even with the distance, I feel that I'm very close to him, and that has to do with attitude, warmth, and yeah. Thank you, Guilherme. Now let's get into English.
Stephanie Charles is an associate at Clearly Gottlieb Steen and Hamilton LLP, a pioneering global law firm with offices in 16 major financial centers around the world. Her practice focuses on international corporate and financial transactions with an emphasis on Latin America. She graduated from Harvard College and then went on to get her Juris Doctor at Harvard Law School. She's been extremely successful in terms of her academic life and also in terms of her professional life. But I think when I think of Stephanie, it's that she gets serious things done without being cold, without being excessively formal. At the same time, she does that in a way that, she's a driven, serious person. It's just not driven and serious in a way that makes you think less of yourself. So it is a huge pleasure to have you here with us, Stephanie, and you are our first up for questions. So before I hit you with 5 questions and ask you for roughly 2-minute responses, it would be great for you to say hi. And before doing so, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you to everybody at UNIINTER who has helped get the word out and market this event, both all across UNIINTER and beyond UNIINTER, and to the partners in different schools, the business school, and many other schools that help bring their students to these international events. So with that, Stephanie, thank you so much for being with us, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Jason, and thank you to the whole team, of course, for coordinating, organizing, and hosting us. Thank you to the co-panelists here. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. And of course, thank you to the attendees for taking the time to meet us, chat with us. Looking forward to our conversation.
Great. Less of me, more of you now. What is your personal international story?
Sure. So as you mentioned, and thank you for the generous introduction, I'm an attorney currently based in the US. I'm based in New York and work in international financial transactions, focusing primarily on Latin America. I'm originally from Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and my international experience really started by studying abroad. I went to college and law school here in the US. And for me, that was a study abroad experience. I always had a curiosity for traveling and for having those kinds of experiences. I always had an interest in languages that I was fortunate to be able to explore. And that's what really landed me at Harvard for college in the first instance, and then back for law school. I'm also fortunate that I was able to tap into that international interest while in college as an undergrad. I was in an environment that really provided a number of opportunities to study abroad, go and work abroad, but also focus my academic journey outside of the US. And for me, that ended up looking like focusing on Brazil and specifically on the history of AIDS and AIDS drug treatment and antiretroviral drug manufacturing in Brazil. That led me to international experiences working in Brasilia in collaboration with the Ministry of Health of Brazil. It led me to pursue thesis research in Brazil. And as you know, after graduating, led me to Harvard Center for Latin American Studies, where we had a chance to work together. I'll pause, but I'll just say that, that first exposure was really what in many ways, what gave rise to my interest in the law, what gave rise to my interest in international aspects of the law specifically. And what led me, even though right now I'm more grounded and rooted in the US, really sparked and fueled and allows me to maintain that interest in cross-border work.
Great. What strategies have you used to cross borders? And you've certainly crossed a lot of borders. I imagine some of those borders have been more familiar to you than others. And just thinking about, how have you made those moves? How have you prepared yourself?
Sure. I think first and foremost, I was tremendously fortunate to be able to have the kinds of opportunities that I've had and that have allowed me to leave and travel, return, set route, unroute, uproute, and set routes again. I think there's a couple of things that I would say there. I think first of all, language, as I mentioned before, my curiosity for languages, and I appreciate the your flexibility in allowing me to introduce myself in English for now. And I know that we'll switch to Portuguese later on, but that opened a lot of doors for me. And I was fortunate, as I said, to be able to tap into that, to be able to study Portuguese, for example, when I was in college, to be able to study Spanish before college. So being in an environment that really prioritized that and that opened, that provided opportunities for me to do that work turned out to be incredibly helpful and opened a lot of doors academically and professionally for me to have the kinds of international experiences that I've had. I think I would also say that I was fortunate to be able to tap into networks that offered the kind of assistance, the kind of support, both in terms of people, humans, but also the financial assistance. Even when I think about my time in college, being in those environments that allowed me to take advantage of certain types of opportunities was also huge. Being in college and having the chance to take part in school organized summer internship experiences, for example. My first one was working in Santiago in Chile, and that was through my college and with the support of my college. I think that's really one of the reasons why I appreciate the work that you all are doing, because in many ways it is possible to take advantage of those kinds of opportunities on our own. Folks travel on their own, they seek out those types of experiences on their own, but in my view, it's also so rich and so powerful to be able to do it with other people and not go at it alone, to be able to learn from others and to be able to have conversations with others, gain their insight, have their support. It gives rise to the kinds of interests that maybe I wouldn't have thought about, even if I hadn't been exposed to the kinds of peoples, the kinds of institutions that I had a chance to be exposed to. So I would say those two things: language on one hand as a really helpful and powerful tool, and then second to that, alongside that, the people and the institutions that I've been able to really rely on so far.
Great, thank you. What's the shortest international experience that you've had that has had the biggest impact?
I alluded to that before. I really valued and really enjoyed my summer internship experiences when I was in college. I mentioned the first one when I worked in Chile with the UN's Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. Because of what I was pursuing academically and as an undergrad, I had that interest to go to Brazil, and as I mentioned, to do thesis research and also to have more of that ability to work in a Brazilian context. When I went to Brasilia, and that was in 2016, I want to say, or 2017, that was my first time going to Brazil. I had been studying Portuguese in college beforehand, and I was there for 2 to 3 months, relatively short. But I was there for a full summer, and when I left, one thing that I was sure of is that I wanted to go back for much longer. So that's what led me to seek out an opportunity locally. At the time I was in Cambridge, and I looked for an opportunity to do work connected to Brazil. I want to emphasize that too. For me, international experience is not just traveling, though that's certainly great, but to the extent I've been able to find opportunities locally that are cross-border in nature, that's been really helpful. So working with the Center for Latin American Studies based in Cambridge with the Brazil program there was tremendously rich. I met such great people, and I continued to fuel my curiosity for and interest in Brazil. And that ultimately led me to you, obviously, working with Dr. Klaas in Sao Paulo. So that was tremendously impactful, certainly because I was there for my 1 year after undergrad, but also it really helped shape the kind of lawyer that I wanted to be. I wanted to practice law in a way that allowed me to stay connected with Brazil, with the Latin American region as a whole, with the Caribbean region as a whole. And for me, that ended up looking like transactional law. It ended up looking like cross-border work specifically. It ended up looking like, seeking out the kinds of firms that had international practices and ultimately landing me at Cleary where I am right now, where again, I tried to seek out those cross-border opportunities, whether I'm traveling. I know that not many of us are traveling lately, but even if I'm based locally, I still try to maintain that global engagement.
Great, and that's a segue to the last question that I'm going to give you, and this is in light of the pandemic, and this is both with your personal and professional current hats on. What do you think will happen in terms of international opportunities in light of the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think it depends on many things. Although with the pandemic, we've all had and various ways to stay local and think local. Although it feels that we've had to close each other off just to, stop the spread of COVID, I think it's also shown that it's not tackling the pandemic, it's not the kind of thing that we've been able to do in an isolated way. Yes, we closed borders early on, last year, and yet here we are. So I think that really emphasizes the level of international collaboration and cooperation that is needed when it comes to actually tackling the pandemic, be it by being able to track the development of the and the progression of the pandemic, but also in terms of thinking about vaccine access. Like that's not something that we can do in an isolated fashion. And I think even though it feels with the pandemic that we've had to close off and stay local, I think it's also shown the extent to which we have to remain global if we are to actually make it out of this successfully, which unclear. But I think that would be my answer there. It's a complicated time, certainly, but I think one that continues to emphasize the need for that type of global engagement that really we can't do without.
Thank you. Ok, agora vamos trocar para o português. Inclusive, vocês vão ver que a Stephanie...
Okay, now let's turn into English. You're going to see how good is Stephanie's Portuguese. So to show her international background, we decided to have her speak in English first. So now I'm going to talk to Professor Maurício Salles. So what's your personal stories in terms of professional work?
Cada está em lugar do planeta, né? Mas tudo bem com vocês? Espero que seja.
So good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where you are in the world. So thank you so much for your participation. First of all, my first opportunity to interact internationally was in 2000 when I went to London. And I went to London because I have a music shop, a record shop. At that time, I had MPT3 started to arrive. Brazil was in a crisis. There wasn't much employment for me, and I couldn't speak English. So I thought that it would be a good thing to go to London, and that's when my journey started. Then, I spent 1 year and a half in London. Then I went to Madrid, and then I came back to Brazil. So throughout this initial time, I think that was one of the most important things that changed my life. First of all, I came back learning, speaking English, basically, not as good as Stephanie, but when we go to a country, we need to learn the language, we need to communicate. It makes our life a lot easier. It makes interactions easier, and then keeping relationships easier as well. So then I had the opportunity to go back to Brazil. I did my master's degree at Unicamp. Then I did my PhD, and then I went to Germany. And when I finished my PhD, I went to the US. And I was there for a year. In Germany, I was there for 2 years. So each experience was something else. I started working in a pub in London. It was a cultural experience. I learned how to cook. Yep, that's why I'm the barbecue guy. Okay, let me ask you something. Your mic is touching your jacket. So, okay, can you tell me a little bit about your experience? You have experience in international research with very important names in your scientific field. And then you are humble enough to say, okay, I'm gonna wash dishes, I'm gonna cook to make a living. And there's a question here that I got to Stephanie, but how did you create this first opportunity? When you're running out of money and you don't have a good infrastructure to help you, how can you take this first step? I sold my car. It wasn't actually a very good car. I had some money to spend like 6 months and leaving, and then I knew that my money was going to run out, so I started working and I found a job. Not much structure. There was nothing very significant. As an American, I lived in Brazil for 15 years. I had the opportunity to meet you, and I usually realize that we have an excess confidence here in the US. And in Brazil, I've learned what is the stray dog complex. That's how we call it. It was the first time I heard that. The stray dog complex is never thinking you are good enough. How was your journey? You're a professor of many students, now some with international background. Can you talk about self-esteem? I think self-esteem is very important. The time that I was in London, I heard many stories from different people. People went back to Brazil because some reason they didn't get used to it. I've always been very open to meet new people and have new experience. Something that Stephanie said, and I found that very interesting, is curiosity. As the more curious you are, more things are gonna appear in your life. So being curious is maybe the most important thing. Now, let me ask you something from your professional side. You're a professor, a consultant in a field that is like booming, renewable energy. What are the main challenges that you see for the next few years to come? How can you leverage opportunities? Renewable energy went through a time where everybody started talking about it, and now it's nothing different. Most of the people know what it is, and now we're going through a different stage, which is reduce carbon footprint in the electric and transportation sectors, in reduce greenhouse effect gases, greenhouse effect emissions. So renewable energy has a crucial role in the society, and probably all renewable energy technologies, electric vehicles, and even hydrogen, everything is in vogue right now. And we have many opportunities in jobs for this sector on the medium long run. But you must be very careful with a couple of things. Solar panels deployment companies, we're going to have this as companies that install air conditioners. So this part is going to remain diluted. We need to think further. We need to start participating in the technological development, to participate in the operation of all these systems. I think that's where the jobs are coming from, and also research. Okay, let me get from, I'm going to repeat the question I asked Stephanie, but what was the experience that had most impact in your life? But can you answer it from your personal life and professional life? For example, you had both experiences, right? A short-term experience that I've had that has transformed me, I think, was the time I was in Madrid, 3 months there. Because basically, personally, I had more opportunity to get into the life of people from many countries. I had some friends from Madrid, but I lived in a place with 9 rooms, with 9 different nationalities. So, and even today, I still keep contact with them. And also, it allowed me to understand and know the experience of everyone who were there. And my professional experience was hugely influenced by the background, the stories of these people. So being open to know the stories of people, as Stephanie said, is very important for us right now. especially when you live abroad. And the final question for you, would you advise young people to go to try to get a career in renewable energies, or would you go for different fields? Selling records is not a good idea, but energy, of course, for sure. I think you're gonna have jobs for at least 20 more years, at least. And the transition we are thinking about all the way to 2050. So job opportunities and careers. I think that will bring more employability in the next few years. Thank you. Now I'm going to talk to Guilherme, then I'm going to go back to the round table. Guilherme, welcome. Thank you for your participation. Thank you, Jason. I'd like to congratulate you for this initiative. You are the organizer of this proposal that is starting to really gain some mass. It's an excellent initiative, and it's a huge pleasure to be here talking to you today. I have a question. I managed to visit Portugal for the first time not long ago, and you have an experience there and a journey there. Could you tell us a little bit about your personal story as an international, internationally, but sometimes you go to a country and you imagine that everything's going to be different. For example, when I think about Asia, going from the US to Asia, I would think about an Asia country. I will think that I need to learn everything from scratch there. And in other countries, like in Brazil, it's different, but it's closer. From my starting point in Brazil, I said, okay, let me understand what are the subtle differences, but I will imagine that the experience that I have, the background that I carry with me is relevant, and I can use it as a base to think on how to act. And I'm curious about your international experience from Portugal to Brazil and more in general, and how have you used your historical, your background to think globally? That's a very good question, because I've been in different countries presenting studies in Latin America mainly. I went to Colombia, Mexico, Argentina, but those countries are very close to Brazil. And we would expect some similarities when you think about culture, for example, in terms of interests and so on. But what I realized when I went to Portugal is that, as you said, it seems that we are a lot more similar to Portugal than to Argentina, that is our neighbor. Not only because of our languages, that's something that can bring us together or bring us closer. Brazil is isolated in terms of its language from the rest of Latin America, but also for some cultural aspects that connect us a lot to the Portugal realities. And I felt the need, well, not the need, but when I started getting to know some of the people, some people are, they don't have like this physical contact. We have this in Portuguese. I was in Lisbon. I was at the University of Minho. I also went to the Coimbra University, and I felt that I was part of it. It seemed like the local culture is very similar to me, much more than other countries in Latin America. And it was a very good experience. I went abroad late. I had my international experience when I went to do my post-doc in 2019. I was working on my postdoc, and I worked with Professor Figueira at the University of Coimbra. I learned a lot there. We've opened it opened some doors to my career. Actually, went with the support of UNINTER. So Professor Delgado, our dean, Professor Schneider, also supported this initiative. And I had a mission when I went there. It was not only to finish my post-PhD, my postdoc, was to establish some partnerships, network, and I did manage to do that. And now I have some partnerships with professors and researchers from Portugal. Great. How did you manage to establish your professional relationships? In some cases, it could be, okay, I've had an initial contact. In other situations, you could have generated this contact out of the blue. If you have both experiences, it would be very interesting for you to tell us, because I'm interested in the possibility of our students replicating your experience. Like, what are the two tools that you used? I think that's something that is crucial. I would say it actually, for those who want to develop an academic experience internationally, especially, at least my experience was to have academic articles, scientific work that can establish a dialogue with the reality of all these other countries. That would be an excellent reason to establish a relationship with a researcher or a professor or someone who is working at a university in a different country, to start this conversation. So you can find some common interest, and this interest will converge, and then you could manage to spend some time studying, doing some research abroad at that other university, looking for some bibliographical references that you're not going to find in your country, for example. If you intend to study abroad, you need to understand the reality, the academic reality of the other country. You need to read authors and researchers from that other country, especially from the university. You're gonna try to have this experience, and then things are gonna happen naturally, because your work, your research, has already started in your search to get to know more about this other country. So, and a researcher is someone who always have the interest to establish a dialogue with someone from another country, and then it's easier to start the conversation. That's what happened to me. I had a huge interest in understanding the reality of journalism in Portugal and in Europe. They have different characteristics from ours, but at the same time, there are lots of similarities, especially because we are used to be a Portuguese colony. At a certain point in time, we had the same legislation in terms of censorship, publishing controls, and that fostered or generated a type of journalism that is different from what happens in the US, for example, or from US press, something that started like 200 years before Brazil, like Argentina. In Argentina, the Latin American press, they started like 250 years before in Brazil, because they had different legislation, different culture, understandings. The understandings of their colonizer was different. So language is crucial, of course. Speaking the language was very important. For me, it was easier, of course, because I was speaking Portuguese in Portugal. Well, of course, the Brazilian Portuguese, the Portuguese Portugal, but you know, even in Portugal, in Coimbra, we feel this multicultural environment. We have students who speak other languages there, even Portuguese students. What would be a cultural difference in terms of a cultural business and difference and business difference that you didn't know before you arrived in Portugal, you didn't know existed? Portuguese are very literal. Some like many Europeans, they are very straightforward. I had met some French, Spanish people, and we can feel this straightforwardness. What you say is very strong. What you commit is very strong. It has a power for these people. It's different from what we see in Brazil, where the relationship among ourselves includes some irony. You say something just to be kind. Say, how are you doing? When I arrived in Portuguese, I went to a restaurant and I looked at the waitress and I said, okay, how are you doing? And she looked at me and smiled and she said, yeah, everything's fine, but it's not something that they ask, how you doing? They don't ask this. It's not a usual thing, a usual way to relate to someone else. Just to give an example, something that had a huge impact in me is this impersonality in the world of business. Here in Brazil, we take things personal. You have a closer relationship with your co-workers. You invite people to have lunch. Families know each other. And there, things are more distant. There's a difference between someone who is at work, who puts their professional hat, and then when they get home and they have their personal hat. Now that goes to our roundtable, and we all can answer. So if you can get everybody on screen, that would be great. I'm reading some questions coming from the audience. You can send more. Some questions are specifically for someone or some areas. So I'm going to start with more broad questions. Some of the questions, or most of them, had to do, how can I get an internship? How can I break some barriers? So if you can think about your answers, I'm going to share now my journey and my experience. Each case is different from the other, but we have some trends here. First of all, I need to think what I have to offer. We all have problems. Companies have problems. How can I help to solve this problem? The answer from my experience is, in the beginning, when I was just out of college, I didn't have much international experience. I wanted to go to Brazil. I spoke some Portuguese, not much, but what I had in my favor, I could write very well in English. At that time, there was a market of telecommunication. Telecoms were opening their market in Brazil, and I started thinking, okay, what can I offer? I can write in English, and I'm willing to go to a place that I don't know and where not many people is willing to do so. And also persistency. So I had the opportunity to go to Brazil. My brother was in a business deal who took him to Brazil. That was pure luck. Then I took the opportunity, I went there, I called at that time, there was no internet, or the internet was not like it is today. And I got a list of companies from the institutional I was at that time, and I started cold calling people. Oh, I come from this area, and I was really well received in general. But what really generated an opportunity for me to go back to Brazil was between some of the things that I literally knocked at the Brazilian America commercial chamber. Can I talk to someone who could give me some advice? I said, okay, I have a friend who works in an international company. The person who used to work with her just left, so there's an opportunity there. So thinking about this experience, I couldn't had foreseen that. Everything that I tried to schedule beforehand didn't lead me to my success. Of course, I'm not saying that you have to just do cold calls, but what I'm trying to say is that you never know where you're going to get your opportunity from, and you need to be ready, and you need to be prepared, and be prepared to think about how can I solve some the other's problem. I've received many emails saying I want that, but that doesn't matter to me. What I can say is that's what I need. If you don't speak the language, if you don't have enough background, think about what you have and what others don't have. Like for people who have families, they need to take care of someone, they don't have that much flexibility. So this flexibility can be beneficial. So you need to be creative. You need to be very courageous. You need to be ready to receive a lot of no's, and you need to keep motivated because, of course, you're gonna face some challenges, and yeah, you need to be positive. That's in terms of internships, and if someone wants to raise their hands, otherwise I'm gonna pick someone. I think I have a curious example here. When I met a Harvard professor, and it was just like that, not thinking about what was going to happen, right? But we were just chatting, and we had some similar interests, and that led me to have a better relationship with them. And we started to feel more interested in one another. And after two more interactions that I had, going to the US, meeting this person, having lunch, and then we came to a point that I finally said, okay, I can help you in what you need. Sometimes it takes some time. It's not something that happens right away. It's something that you need to build. You're building something and you don't know what's going to happen in the future. And that's how I got to Harvard. And with that, he realized that, yes, I could help. And then we started doing some partnerships, and FAPAS financed or maybe not financed, but funded my PhD. And what I'm trying to say is that you need to be open to solve the other's problem. Stephanie, Guilherme, do you have anything to say? Do you want to add something? Yes, Jason, really, I totally agree with everything that people have said. What I would say, this issue of trying and not thinking that it's going to be too hard, that that's not going to happen. I think it's important to try, and it's important to think of different options for support that might be around. For example, you want to study abroad. I've tried where I thought that I would be able to have the financial support from a university, which is possible in the US. It is possible, but you have to do a lot of research. But even for a foreign student, there are opportunities to do that abroad, and there are opportunities to do research and internships. Remember, Jason, that we worked in in a Harvard program for professional people, for researchers who they try, the people who tried and found the opportunities, short opportunities to spend some time in Harvard and work there and contribute in that in that manner. So trying and being creative is not something, it's not only studying and working, it has to do with researching. There are many options around, even for people who have already graduated. There are fellowships. You can try, you can talk. Having this conversation today is very important. Just like you said, some of the opportunities I had were in like going to an event and start chatting and say, okay, hey, are you interested in this health sector in Brazil? Oh, I know someone who worked there. Do you want to get in contact with them? And that's how I arrived in this internship in Brasilia when I was doing my undergrad studies. And when I came back, I also wanted to keep this contact with Brazil. And I remember I sent an email to the Center for Latin American Studies in Harvard to say, listen, I don't know if you're hiring, if you have internship opportunities, but I'm a student and I want to work with you in your office. I could do administrative work. Can we talk? And that's how I worked at the Latin American Center when I was at the university. And again, that was the work who took me to Sao Paulo to have an experience, a one-year experience that was great. So thinking creatively and trying and talking and sharing your experiences. I think that's very important as well. Okay, now I'm gonna pass the floor to Guilherme, and I'm gonna also ask a couple of questions that we have here. One has to do with people going abroad where language is a barrier. So they wanna go to somewhere, but they don't speak the language. And then age-wise, someone say, oh, I'm 35 years old or I'm older. How does that work? My answer would be regarding both of them. Think from a point of view. For example, I'm in the US. I want to receive someone from abroad. If I think about someone young, okay, they are more flexible. They're going to be my rules. But those are the positive side of having young people here. Someone who is 35 years old, is more experienced, more mature, not much risk in terms of behavior. They have more points of reference from the past. I'm not saying that it's impossible. Regardless of age, the first time I went abroad, I was 15 years old, and I've repeated it many times, going to different places. Having the attitude and asking yourself, what can I offer? Someone say, I'm very young, I don't speak the language, but I'm up to anything. And you can think, okay, who has demand? Who needs something? So there are two ways to become more intelligent. One is to talk about with expats or those in Brazil and ask what are their experience. So that's what I'm calling intelligence. We need to gather intelligence and try to know about the place you're going to. You need to ask someone who knows your background and also the reality that you don't know. So that helps a lot. And then you can also have more opportunities taking this different path, larger community. I have many Brazilians in Boston, many Brazilians in Portugal, but also we have the other side. I'm going to somewhere there's no Brazilian, no international people. I'm going to be the only one. Less opportunity, but less competition. So in my experience, there's no single recipe to make a cake, to bake a cake. So, but think something that you can offer that is positive. Positive. If you don't have the experience, think about your flexibility. You have that in more, someone who's more mature, more experienced, they're not going to have that. So, Guilherme, you were talking about the language. So we have people getting interested in Portugal and also age. Well, the first thing we have to have in mind is that nothing is impossible. We have to start from this idea. It's always possible to move to a different country, live in a different country, as long as you've built a career for that. That's not going to happen from one day to the other. We need to plan. Of course, lucky is always something that can happen, but otherwise, you can be lucky, or you can plan your life for traveling and study abroad in a couple of years and go for it. Maybe you don't even need to sell your car to move abroad. You can start saving money to have an international experience. And you have to know that you're putting all your money into something. I mean, not everything, but at that time, what I'm trying to say is you need to start planning. You need to do your research. You need to be prepared. Of course, when you get there, you're gonna find that many things are different, but you need to know at least how to speak minimally with people, know how to ask for some food or some drink, but nothing is impossible. I think that many institutions enjoy having people from abroad because it's good for them. They can then start receiving more resources. That's gonna add to their programs. Thinking about the university, it's gonna add to a certain class, for example. Perfect. We are almost at the end of our event. I'm gonna just say something based on what Guilherme just said, something that came to my mind. And then I'm gonna ask each one of you to say your final comments and address it very pragmatically. So if you have any question, try to match with your final comment. And once again, I want to thank you so much for being here today. My comment, based on what Guilherme said, think about planning. The value of this step, when we're thinking about questions and comments, right? There are some foreigners in Brazil now from Portugal, Asia, Europe, the US, doesn't matter. Not many, or remotely. There's someone who wants to go there. The value of someone who is willing to help you is huge. If you don't understand how to get to a certain country, but yes, I can think about someone who comes from this country or who is from this country who needs my help. We also know about the importance of someone who opened our doors. For example, me in Brazil, can I open this door to someone? I can plan, just like Professor Guilherme said. If I can help someone, yes, I can help someone. It's going to be a goodwill, you know, in good faith. And again, I have some goals. Okay, if I want to go to Canada, let me think about someone who wants to come to Brazil from Canada. I understand Brazil. I can offer someone something, you know. And then when I go to Canada, I can ask this person, okay, can you talk to me? If you find the right person, and guys, there are many right people. So do your homework, plan, and try to plant the seeds now so that in the future you can harvest them. you can harvest the seed you planted. So now, Stephanie, thank you so much. Jason, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. I found the questions about language is very important, very interesting. And what I can say is that for me, learning languages wasn't only at school. I've learned a lot working. I've learned a lot. Actually, when I was in the US West, you working in an environment where people were speaking Portuguese. I've learned a lot doing that. So what I could say is it's hard. We shouldn't wait until my English is like perfect or my perfect is perfect. My Portuguese wasn't perfect. And I know that I've learned a lot, of course, at school, but also in my professional experiences, personal experiences with other people. And I think that we don't need to wait the perfect storm, even the language to try, you know. We always have to learn, and we can learn during our experience at during our international experiences. Right, yeah, Professor Salas, yes. Yeah. The language issue is very interesting. When I went to London, I think I studied here for a year, 1.5 hours of English class per day. When I got there, my luggage got lost. I tried to explain that in English, and I had to describe my bag. I tried to do that with a 1 year of language on my back, and the person just showed me a catalog of bags to pick one, and it worked. In Germany, same thing. I got my scholarship to study in Germany. I was studying French because I wanted to go to France, but I got a scholarship to go to Germany. It was very interesting, so I studied German for 2 weeks. I could speak English and it helped, but yeah, getting afraid of languages, actually you don't need to be scared, but you have to study a little bit. It makes your life easier. Professor Guilherme? You're on mute. I have a couple of other questions here, but I have some questions that I have here. People are asking about journalism and if they think to be a journalist, if it's important to have an international experience. Yeah, I think it's interesting to have an international experience. It's going to help you for sure. It's going to be important, but it makes no sense if you just go there and just go somewhere for tourism. That's not going to help you. So you need to focus on what you want to do later on. We need to know why you're going abroad. That's going to be crucial. And then just like my fellow colleagues just said, language is important. At a certain times I had to speak English in Portugal. My English is not good, but I had to talk to people in English in Portugal and other countries. It's the same story. But you need to make an effort. Alessandra is saying that what can you suggest to someone who don't speak a different language? What I can say is study. You have many opportunities. Watch movies with subtitles, you know, and invest in studying a different language. Knowing a different language is important. So now I'm going to close. Thank you, you guys who were part of this panel. Thank you very much. Guilherme just said this is a new initiative. This Talking Business. Internal partnerships are very important. Having an audience embrace the world is very important. So thank you so much who's here with us. Thank you for your participation. And we are waiting for you in November 18th to our next event. Bye-bye.